Zal Terebe in Hilchis Tefillin. Siman Lamed Tes, Nerechaim, Seif Aleph. Siman Lamed Tes, Seif Aleph, and Nerechaim. Discussing who's kosher to write Tefillin. And the Sif starts Tefillin Shekos V'Nevet Knani, gives examples, Isha Koton. And then in the middle of the Sif he goes, Oik Savon Yisrael Mumor L'chol HaTorah. Or was if a tefillin written by somebody who is a mumor l'chol HaTorah. Afilu l'teyaven, even if it's a teyaven. Or yafilu l'avera achas, elo she'ena l'teyaven. He's mumor to one avera, it's not l'teyaven, it's also not l'hachis. The only reason he's mumor to it is because he doesn't really care about it. In a choshesh klal, for example, what's the definition of a mumor? The Alter Rebbe puts it down for you over here. Sheyesh lefonav heter ve'isur, maniach ha'heter ve'oichel es ha'isur. He has in front of him the two choices of equal situation, and he specifically goes for the not kosher one. But he doesn't do it lahachis because he wants to go against the Eibusher. He does it because he doesn't care. His tefillin are pasul because it says ukshartam uksaftam. Just like whoever has an obligation of ukshartam, his uksaftam works also. Whoever does not have an obligation of ukshartam, his uksaftam doesn't work either. So what is sheyesh nebekshira? What does it mean that there's the chiyuv is on him? Obviously, even on the mumar also has a chiyuv to put on tefillin, l'chayra. Just because he decided he's not interested in putting on tefillin doesn't mean, or he decided he's not interested in keeping mitzvahs doesn't mean he's potter from tefillin. Rather, it means shemuzhar aleh u'ma'amin bo. Just believes in the mitzvah. And if he does not, he's not. Now, then the Alter Rebbe brings a machlekes. What is the category of a mumar? He says mumar u'masur. Afapi shehem muzharim aleh. A mumar, even though the Torah he's still chayiv in the mitzvahs. Kevan sheparku oil. Einam bevad einam amin b'mitzvahs. They already lost their status. They're for sure not ma'im b'mitzvahs, and therefore they lose their status of being in the category of ukshartam. Some people, there's a machlekes, yesh emrim, that someone who's only mumar for one aveda is isser is only midrabanon. That the chachamim made him k'nechry l'chol HaTorah kolo. And some people say no. The first one is it seems like it's a deiraisa. The first shit seems like it's a deiraisa. But if it's a mumar l'chol HaTorah, and what's the definition of l'chol HaTorah? We're going to see later. What's l'chol HaTorah? Doesn't mean that he has to violate each and every single one of the 613 mitzvahs. It's very hard, close to impossible. Alter Rebbe actually in Hilchis Shchita, we're going to see it's I think the shortest Kuntres Achron I've ever seen. It says two words in it. It says Rubi Kechuloi. That's the whole Kuntres Achron. It says what's mumar l'chol HaTorah? It's Rubi Kechuloi. Majority of the mitzvahs are relevant to you. To a Jew in today's day and age, he violated, then he's considered a mumar l'chol HaTorah. Even if it's a teyaven, he is midivri Torah apostle for everything. Why? Sharehu kenochri l'chol dvarav. He becomes like a goy. His definition is the same as a goy. K'moshe yotzim in aklal, he left Klal Yisrael. That is one category of somebody's kenochri l'chol davar. Alter Rebbe continues, afilu meinei lemur avodah zarah l'chalas haShabbos v'farhesya hu kenochri l'chol dvarav. If he is not mumar l'chol HaTorah kolo, but is only mumar for avodah zarah or l'chal Shabbos v'farhesya, all of this is going to be explained in Kuntres Achrons and Hilchis Shchita that we're going to see soon, short Kuntres Achrons. Just interestingly, it's mumar l'avodah zarah doesn't say v'farhesya, l'chal Shabbos does say v'farhesya. He's also k'nechry l'chol dvarav, also the same category as a goy. Like it's going to explain you today. There's the two categories of people that are there's a mumar l'chol HaTorah kula. Even if it's a tiyav and not lahachis, or that's not it's not lahachis, he's considered like a goy. Someone who does avodah zarah is considered like a goy. Someone's Machal Shabbos Fayas is considered like a goy. What's the simple understanding of someone's considered like a goy? It means that any halachas where a yid has, any chazakas a yid has, any namanas a yid has, this guy doesn't have. Regardless of whether he is following the rest of the mitzvahs or not. Somebody's a mumar lahachis that he dafke specifically is going to avoid doing mitzvahs and do things dafke the asr, which means he's going to have in front of him kosher and asr, and he's dafke going to go to the asr because he wants to be lahachis, even if it's only for one thing. He's still also in the same category kenochi l'chol Torah, like it will be explained also in Yeredeya. And then the Alter Rebbe points out something which is obviously common sense. If he doesn't put on tefillin, and not regardless of whether it's lahachis or not, it's not lahachis. He's doing it, he doesn't care. Yeah, he does it because he doesn't care about it. He's not lahachis. It's not the te'oven. It's not lahachis, not te'oven. He's also not kosher for this specific mitzvah for tefillin. Unless he is eina manichal l'te'oven, that he has a specific other reason why he's doing it, then he's kosher lichtiv. Then he is kosher. So here, this is the first instance you're going to see in Shulchan Aruch Bechlal. It's in Alter Rebbe, it's also in the big Shulchan Aruch, in Siman Amates. The first discussion regarding a mumar, the Alter Rebbe right away sends you to Siman Beis. Siman Beis in Yeridei, you're going to see it in the same booklet, just turn the page, Siman Beis, in Yeridei, which discusses the Shchita of a goy, a mumar, cotton. The opening statement of Shchitas Nachri Nevela, any Shchita that a goy does is not to be eaten, you're not allowed to eat it. And whether it's Asr Ba'no or not depends on whether he had in mind to shech it for Avodah Zarah. We say Stam Goyim. The Alter Rebbe here tells you something which we know from a lot of other places, that the Stam Goyim are not, they're not shechting specifically for Avodah Zarah. All they're doing is, the whole religion is Ma'aseh Avosayim B'Yadeim, they just copy what their parents did and therefore not really have any intention. So there's no intention for Avodah Zarah, but mele it's not Asr Ba'no. But if there is a priest who does shchita, so you say probably in his mind he had in mind to serve it for Avodah Zarah, and therefore the meat is even Asr Ba'no because it's a category of Avodah Zarah. But that is regarding a goy. Yeah, this is regarding a goy. The halachas of a mumar, a mumar l'chol Torah, a mumar l'hachis l'chol Torah, is really in Seif Hey, which we're going to get to it in 2 minutes. So first I want to go to another siman in Alter Rebbe, in also another 2 places in Orach Chaim, which also mentions it. The next one is a siman Kuf Chav Ches, which discusses a kohen. When a kohen loses his status to do Birkas Kohanim, Siman Kuf Chav Ches, the Alter Rebbe writes Siman Seif Nun Aleph, a kohen who became a Heimer Dasi, when became a Christian, or even became a Muslim, he is Chachamim put a knas on him that he loses his kedusha and he can't do Nesiyas Kapayim, and he can't get the Aliyah of Kohen as long as he doesn't do tshuva. Once he does tshuva, he's chayzer the kedushasei. And in Seif Nun Beis, when they're talking about if he doesn't have one of the things that were mentioned that prevents a person from doing Birkas Kohanim, he says even in middle of Seif Nun Beis towards the end, people are talking about him as Gilui Arayis. Except for the The only exception is Chil Shabbos Farhesia, Shu Kenochri l'chol dvarav. Again, it's considered like a goy. Well, any other aveda prevents you from doing Birkas Kohanim, except for somebody who is Mechal Shabbos, because that puts him into the category of Kenochri l'chol divrayim. And Meimir Das, somebody who switches his religion, is Mishum Knas, like was mentioned earlier. But when it comes to Mechal Shabbos, we made them Kenochri l'chol divrayim. So you see it in every place where Chil Shabbos is mentioned, it's going to be the same definitions, Kenochri l'chol divrayim. Same thing is in Hilchos Eruvin, which is the next page, in Siman Shin Pei Hey. There's a halacha that when you have two Jews in the property share a yard, it's two houses, they have to do Erev Chatzeres between them. If it's a Yid and a Goy, you don't have to. And so over here in Siman Shin Pei Hey discusses Duki Mumar. He says, what's the din of Yisrael? Mumar Avodah Zarah in Sif Gimel. Again, someone who's a mumar who does avodah zarah, or Mechal Shabbos befarhesia. Again, over here you see the differentiation between mumar avodah zarah and farhesia. Mechal Shabbos is farhesia. I feel in Mechal b'divrei soifrim. Even Mechal Shabbos only things that are asim d'Rabbanon. Again, Kenochri l'chol dvarav. It's considered a goy. V'tzarich lisker mimenu, and you have to do schiras hashus from him. And turn the page, and what's considered the Mechal Mumar L'chal Shabbos and Farhesia? The first place Alter Rebbe defines that it was Befarhesia. Elo kesherogil bekach ve'eino nizhar klal. Mechal Shabbos and Farhesia is not only that somebody sees a Yid being Mechal Shabbos, is that he does it on a regular basis publicly. He doesn't care about it klal at all. Not if one time that he occurrence. It has to become to be defined as Mechal Shabbos Farhesia, aside from the fact that it has to be done by Farhesia, also has to be that he doesn't care about it at all, and he does it as a matter of regular. It's his regular way of behaving. Now we're going to go to Hilchos Shchita, because Alter Rebbe references Hilchos Shchita in Siman Lamed Tes. We're going to go to Seif Hey. The first four Seifim in Hilchos Shchita and Siman Beis discuss a goy, a mumar l'teyoven, someone who when someone's a mumar, if you could rely on him for Shchita. And there's a lot of interesting discussions over there about somebody who messed up on Shchita. When is it considered the long kunta sachron, which is very easy. When this person is considered a Mechal Shabbos, and when this person is considered a B'mezid, does money play a role in this? We'll see if we have time today, but we're going to first discuss Mechal Shabbos and go from Mechal Shabbos to Mechal Shabbos. The discussion is if a person is trusted for Shchita, because we learned it in the Siman Aleph that anybody who's involved in Shchita is considered that he knows the stuff. However, there has to be a certain level of naamanus. We discussed about avodim, even avodim that you don't need meshucharim. The Beis Yosef doesn't mention meshucharim. As long as you have to have a certain level of trust when it comes to things where a person has to be trusted. When it comes to shchita specifically, there are a lot of things that a person that if the shochet is the only one that knows what's going on. You see a chicken with its head off. You have to trust the shochet that he didn't do any of the things that make this animal puzzle. You see a chicken in a package, already cut into pieces. There's no way of knowing. You have to trust the shochet and you have to trust the butcher. And it's a very high level of trust because there's a lot of things you can never check afterwards. There's something which you could check. It's not a suffix. Everybody knows that. That something which could be nisbared is never in the category of a suffix. Certain things you could find out. When it comes to a shchita, if it was sheichet roiv simonim or not, there is no way of knowing. If you push the knife too hard and the animal died from the pressure and not from the cut, there's also no way of knowing. The only person who will know is the sheichet. If the knife had a nick in it, and the animal died because it ripped. The nick got stuck on the vein, and it ripped the animal's vein, rather than cutting it. Also, you're never going to know. The only person who would know is the sheikhet. The sheikhet, when he passes the knife, he feels if it gets stuck, he knows he might have messed up in it. If he feels he put too much pressure, he knows he might have messed up. So there's a big level of trust when it comes to shechita. Still in all, if you see in the first few sifim of Siman Beis, even a mummer in certain scenarios is trusted. Someone who is not shemer everything. If the knife was checked before, if certain scenarios we're going to be discussing in a different situation. Now, but that's all when it comes to mummer l'teyavin, mummer for specific things, maybe not l'teyavin. But we're discussing the Mechalel Shabbos. So that's in Seif Hey. Seif Hey says mummer lahachis. Not a mummer l'teyavin. Mummer lahachis, which is also the other thing we discussed. Someone's a mummer lahachis. That means, what's the mummer definition of the mummer lahachis? We already saw before in Siman Lametes that it's somebody who will put aside, if he has in front of him kosher and treif, he will put aside the kosher and choose a treif, and the reason he's doing it is lahachis, even if it's only for one specific aveira. Oy shehu mummer la'avodas kichavim, or that he is a mummer for avodas zareh, or l'chal Shabbos b'farhesya, or mechal Shabbos b'farhesya. Oy shehu mummer l'chal ha'torah afilu chutz mishtayim elu, dine k'nachri. Or he's mummer l'chal ha'torah kula, but he's dafke yes keeping Shabbos and is not over the avodas zareh, he's still considered like an achri. And then if somebody if somebody doesn't care about eating kosher meat, and he does it beloy teyavin, not l'teyavin or not lahachis, he's also considered kemumar lahachis. We make him into a lahachis. When a person does it because he doesn't care, not because he has a specific reason to do it, but not because it's more comfortable for him, and doesn't do it because he's angry at the Eibusher, still, when it comes in this scenario, we convert him into a mumar lahachis. Now, today goes into the whole discussion over here in each one of these words that we discussed. What's a mumar lahachis? Now, today right away explains to you in Kuntesachrin Ches. Now, what's interesting is you're going to see in the Cheshchita that sometimes there are certain things that seem like they would have belonged in the Pnim of the Alter Rebbe. They ended up marked as a Kuntesachrin. Usually the Kuntesachrin was made as a bir on what the Alter Rebbe wrote. Here, sometimes the Kuntesachrin is straight on the Pnim, sometimes the Kuntesachrin is independent. But it's to a certain degree, there's a lot of the Kuntesachrin in Cheshchita, some of them are easier to learn than in other places. So he explains what's a mumar lahachis. Definition, it's very important to know the definitions, because we realize we have mumar l'teyavin, mumar lahachis, and the mumar that's not l'teyavin. And we have a mumar l'chal ha'torah kula, mumar to a specific aveira, and mumar to an aveira that's not the one we're discussing about. Each of those categories we have. And do you have to have kol ha'torah kula? Do you have to have a specific one? Which ones make you, Chil Shabbos makes you k'nachri l'chol davar, avodas zareh makes you k'nachri l'chol davar, except for by a kohen that for some reason that becoming Oved avodas zareh is only mitzat knas, and Chil Shabbos and mitzat k'nachri l'chol davar, but I don't know the reason for that. So the Alter Rebbe explains to you over here, it's what's lahachis. He has in front of him heter and iser. He puts the heter to the side. Shavik ketera. He puts the heter to the side and takes over the isura. And the reason is lahachis v'limrid b'koinoi. He's doing it dafke to get the Eibusher angry. But then you have what happens if a person doesn't believe in anything? A person doesn't believe in the Eibusher, so he doesn't do anything. Lahachis the Eibusher doesn't believe in him. So what category does that put him into? Because you have a tiyov and you know there's a Eibusher and you have a tabi about taiva. Or you don't care, or you're doing it of tzilach as the Eibusher. But if you don't believe in the Eibishter, which category do you fall into? It's not Latiyov, not Lahachis. So here it tells you, Nizer ko be'iminu ze'imamim b'mitzvah zu, the Rambam puts it in the same category as Lahachis. It means you don't have to have in mind, even if you just don't believe in this specific mitzvah, and that's why you are not following it, you become a mumar lahachis for that category. And even though it's only for one mitzvah, still, because we made him into a lahachis, because he doesn't believe, and the one who doesn't believe, we made him into a lahachis, the moment he becomes a mumar l'davar echad lahachis, because he doesn't believe in it, he automatically becomes mumar l'chol ha'torah kula. Mumar l'chol ha'torah kula is a different category than mumar l'davar echad. Mumar l'davar echad could be trusted for other things. Mumar l'chol ha'torah kula is not trusted for anything. Where does this fall into place? Everybody knows you have Jews from different branches of Judaism. Some of them do not believe in Torah min hashamayim, they believe in Eibishter b'chlal. Some of them believe in certain things. If you have a person that does not believe in a specific mitzvah because of a whatever reason it is, he doesn't believe in the mitzvah and he doesn't follow that mitzvah, then his category is not a mumar l'davar echad. His category is a mumar l'chol ha'torah kula. He's not in the category of Baal Taiva. A hechsher, a conservative rabbi, is not the category of, even if he keeps Shabbos, that could fall, depending on his belief system, it could fall into the category of mumar l'chol ha'torah kula, even if he would be a frum conservative rabbi. Important to point this out. And once he's a mumar lahachis, even though it's only for one thing, and even though it's only because he's a min, he falls in the same category as a nachri l'chol davar. Once he falls in the category of a nachri, shchita is nevela. It's no longer kosher. Why is that? Over here you're going to see the same thing. Sheyotza miklal Yisrael. By the mere fact that he chose to do something lahachis, he walked out of Klal Yisrael. Hoitzi yisatzim min haklal. And he adds, even if Nizhar, he's careful in every single aspect of Hilchah Shchita, because we're talking about Shchita here, but it applies to other things also. He's Nizhar, but the Shchita is something that he does follow. He's kofer in something else. Shchita he follows to the T. Bechol digdukeh, the Alter Rebbe writes. But he does one Aveda Lahachis. And why did he do this Aveda Lahachis? Not because he was stam lazy. Laziness is not kfira. It's not the min, it's not apikoides. He didn't want to work hard. That's not considered lahachis. He dafka wants to limit bekoinoi, or either because he wants to go against the Eibishter, or because he doesn't believe in the specific mitzvah, he becomes a mumar lahachis, and that happens even befilu b'pa'am achas, even in one time. Mumar lahachis, remember this, the category of mumar lahachis happens even in one time. It doesn't have to be a like we saw in Chilul Shabbos and Farhesia, that it has to be a standard thing over there. So if it's a one-time thing, it's not. However, what happens if he doesn't do it l'tiyavin, but doesn't do it lahachis? He knows it's wrong. He's not interested in going against the Eibishter. Every Yid Be'etzim is not interested in going against the Eibishter. Elamai, he got used to it. Started off l'tiyavin, and you start doing something, first time you have guilty conscience, then it becomes only l'tiyavin, and at some point it becomes something to do usual, the hergel, something which is usual. And so much so that cave on the dash it became something that he doesn't even think about. He has no conscience, he has no guilty conscience about it. And he does it even shlei l'tiyavin. L'tiyavin is when you have kosher and you have treif, and the kosher doesn't look as good as the treif. So l'tiyavin, you take a treif from, fine. It's about taiva. But if it's a person is just so used to doing something wrong that he will automatically go to the treif regardless of whether it's a l'tiyavin or not, but not because he's against it, because he just got used to it, he is still not in the category of this guy that's a mumar lahachis. because we did mention before that somebody who does one thing, he's not a lahach, he's not a tav, and sometimes he could be considered a mumar l'chol Torah kula. But over here in this, we're talking about if this, when it comes to a specific thing, one thing he's not, he's considered a mumar, he's considered mumar l'davar echad, not mumar l'chol Torah kula. And therefore, since mumar l'davar echad, the only time he will lose his naamanus and shchita is if he doesn't care about shchita. Because all this only applies, you would say, maybe it applies also to, because in Shabbos, in Hilchah Shabbos we mentioned, not Hilchah Shabbos, regarding Mechal Shabbos we mentioned that even if he's over on something which is Yisod Rabbanon. But over here he's going to tell you, what's the mumar that we're talking about, the mumar lahachis? It's only in something which is deraisa. It's written clearly in Torah. Averes and furoshes b'Torah. But something which is not clearly written in Torah, rather it's only Torah Sheba'al Peh. And the reason why he doesn't do it is because he does not believe in Torah Sheba'al Peh. He's not considered a Nachri. Even though he's not Bekoides, because he doesn't believe in Torah Sheba'al Peh. And he's even worse than a Nachri when it comes to saving him. That Nachri is a man of Meridin. By me, not Bekoides Meridin. It's worse. He's Apikodes as Meridin, but when it comes to this, he's worse than the guy when it comes to Meridin. But when it comes to this scenario, when it comes to considering a Mum L'chal Torah Kula, he's not considered Mum L'chal Torah Kula. Why is that? We're discussing the Shchita. Shchita is written in Torah. It's a Vachta. It's written in Torah. He don't believe in Torah. So when it comes to this question of Shchita, he's careful. If he's careful in Shchita, and he does it properly according to Torah Sheba'al Peh, even though he doesn't believe in Torah Sheba'al Peh, but he does it according to the right way, then he's trusted when it comes to Shchita. Same thing is all the other things that a person gets punished for. Ein l'chelik elam habo. A perek, very interesting perek in Gemara, perek chelik, the last perek of Sanhedrin. And over there, it's a whole list of things that the person apikodes in the chelik elam haba. It's one of the things. Mevaza Talmid Chacham, mevaza acherim b'fnei Talmid Chacham. What's the issue with mevaza acherim b'fnei Talmid Chacham? He doesn't care about the Talmid Chacham. In the bush, he has no shame in front of Talmid Chacham. It's also apikodes in the chelik elam haba. Someone who calls Rabbi Muvak with his name. All these are not considered like Nachrim. Even that you consider them like Apikoides, and Apikoides is worse than the Goy Ladin Meridin, like we said a second ago. Still in all, he's not considered for this, he's not considered a Nachri. That is when it comes to what's a Lahachis. That's the first one that's considered a Nachri. A Mumar Lahachis Ba'Aveido Achas is like a Goy. And we already said, Aveda Achas, it doesn't have to be that he's doing it, either he's doing it against the Eibishter or because he doesn't believe in this specific mitzvah. That's a Mumar Lahachis. And there has to be a mitzvah deraisa that's written clearly in Torah. That's when he falls into that category. Even if he could be apikodes, but he's not considered Nachri L'chol Davar if he violates something else. But now go to the next line. The next one is Avodah Zarah. Someone who does Avodah Zarah, when does he fall into the category of a person that's a Nachri L'chol Davar? Avodah Zarah, what makes him a Nachri L'chol Davar? So first of all, over here also we see, just like by a Mumar Lahachis, Laveda Achas, is enough to do it one time with that intention. Same thing by Avodah Zarah. Even if he only does Avodah Zarah one time, and it's vafilu betzina. That's what I mentioned to you before. It's not befarhes, not like Chilul Shabbos. He automatically becomes a mumar l'chol Torah kula, and he becomes a goy, except for kiddushin. And you don't have to do it lahachis. When it comes to Avodah Zarah, you'll see the Chilul Shabbos. It doesn't have to be done lahachis. It's a one aveda. Really, you should be considered mumar davar echad. It's not. When it comes to Avodah Zarah and Chilul Shabbos, we don't care about lahachis. Even if it's not lahachis, if it's only the te'oven, he still becomes a... Yeah. Not b'farhesia, but tzina, he tells you. Fill up tzina.
All these things are also Nigga Shabbos.
Yeah, pretty much. No, Shabbos and farhesia. When is it? The only exception is oines nefashos. If it's Oved Avodah Zarah because of oines nefashos, because he had no choice or other would have been dead, then takas yihareg val yavar, but bepoil he wasn't yihareg and he was over. It was mitzad pikuach nefesh. He does not lose his status. He does not become a k'nachri l'chol divreim. And over here, the Alter Rebbe adds something interesting. The Anusim, which were able to escape, and they only stayed in their countries because their wealth was sitting over there, they are in the category of a mumur. Even though they follow all the mitzvahs. The fact is, klapi chutz, there are Oved Avodah Zarah, and when it comes to Avodah Zarah, where they have no difference between the te'oven and lahachis, the only time that a Oved Avodah Zarah, the te'oven is going to be considered, not going to become considered Oved Avodah Zarah, is if he had no choice and he couldn't leave and he couldn't run away, and that's where he was born, and that's how he was stuck. What's the Chal Shabbos of Farhesia? We saw in earlier, what's the Chal Shabbos of Farhesia that it does on a regular basis. What does Befarhesia mean? People think that Befarhesia means only if you do it in front of 10 people. Alter Rebbe tells you, B'fnei Asara Yisrael, everybody knows, in front of 10 people, that's Befarhesia. Oy she'adavar mefursum v'yoda she'isparsim. Not only if you do it in front of 10 people. Something which you did in a public, a person did in a public manner, and he knows it's something which will become, which is public knowledge. He's already in the category of Mechal Shabbos and Farhesia. Doesn't have to go and find 10 people and do Mechal Shabbos in front of them. The mere fact that he does something publicly, and therefore he is Mechal Shabbos publicly, even if it's not in front of 10 people, but it's in a way, in a place where that's going to be Nisparsim, he already goes to the category of Farhesia. Doesn't have, again over here, just like by Avodah Zarah, it doesn't have to be lahachis. It could also be l'te'oven, but it has to be b'mezid. Just like by Avodah Zarah we mentioned b'mezid, over here also has to be b'mezid. And b'isura d'oraisa, it's b'isura d'oraisa to go into that. And not like we saw in Siman Shin Pehei, that enem chala filu b'divrei sefer and k'nechri l'chol dvarav. I don't know, that seems like a contradiction from one place to another. Over here only says v'isur d'oraisa. Over there k'nechri l'chol dvarav is also an isur d'rabanan, the way it says in Hilchos Eruvin. Over here it tells you it's only only if it's isur d'oraisa. And being that he falls into the category of Milchal Teira Kula, again, even if we know that he keeps Shchita according to all its Dikdukim, he's still considered like a goy. And afilu le'osa elapam achas nasamum Milchal Teira K'nachri. Even if you only do it one time, b'mezid, with the intention of it becoming public or that it became public, you already fall again into the category of Mechal Shabbos of Farhesia. So the fact, again, doesn't fully stem with what it says in the Chazeruvin, that there has to be something he does regularly. If he does it only one time, it's not, but over there it says if he does it one time because he had no choice. So when he does it one time b'mezid, he falls into the category. Already. You could explain that in the Chazeruvin, he's talking about somebody that lav dafka is b'mezid or b'shoig. The fact is, he does it on a regular basis. We already know that we don't have to start digging if it's b'mezid or not. When he does one time b'mezid, and it's in a public manner, we know that he falls into that category. So if it's b'mezid and isur d'oraisa one time, he becomes a Mechal Shabbos v'Farhesia. That's what it says over here. And over there, if it's going to be a multiple times, a regular thing, even if it's the Rabbanon, then it doesn't mention the word b'mezid over there. then he is also in the same category. However, when does he become that Mechal Shabbos? Mefarhesia. If a guy went and shechted on Shabbos, when he shechted the animal, is the animal today for kosher? Before he shechted the animal, it's kosher yid. Shechted the animal b'mezid on Shabbos, suddenly, he knows it's wrong, doesn't have to be lahachis, it could be l'tiyavin, he wanted a good steak. It's a, that shchita is kosher, the Alter Rebbe tells you. Brings from the Shach. That shchita, what he did on Shabbos, that one, is still on Mechal. He only became Mechal Shabbos after this happened. Faresia, when this happened. So shchita remains kosher. What he did that first time, that shchita is still kosher, because he's still in the old category until he actually did Aveda. And then, like I pointed out to you before, what's the mumar l'chol ha'toyra kula? He tells you what's the one, if it's a mumar l'chol ha'toyra, even if he keeps Shabbos and Avodah Zareh, as I told you, it's the shortest Kuntasach I ever found. Mumar l'chol ha'toyra, it tells you ruba kekula. You don't have to do every specific Aveda in Torah. You don't have to violate every leisesa and avoid every assay. Ruba kekula. There's not that many. If you go, there's a, today on Golos you can only keep 80-something mitzvahs in Chutz La'aretz. Necessarily you have a few more, which are, some of them are derais, some are suffik derais, some of them are bechlal derabanan. But again, you have not that many mitzvahs, and it's, again, to be able to fall into the category of Mumul Chal Kula, you have to do the majority. Ruba kechula. What's Roiv? 51%? What's Roiv? It's 87, no? Chafetz Chaim writes 87? I think 87, right? Okay.
Actually, what's 87?
87 you could do, I think it's 87 mitzvahs that you could do today. Huh? I think it's only 87 you could do. 87 assays maybe, and a few others. Now, we have also, if somebody in this specific mitzvah, he does in the mitzvah, specific mitzvah of shchita or whatever we're talking about, a specific one that we're discussing. He doesn't do it l'teyavim, he doesn't do it l'hachis either. Or in the mitzvah that we're specifically discussing, his nemanas, he becomes like a lahach, he becomes like a mumar lahachis, converts it to mumar lahachis. But this is special for shchita and for a few other very unique situations. Why is that? Because by shchita, it says, v'zavachta v'achalta. You have to be a bar zvicha. There's someone who's chayev in zvicha. And he is, and by the fact that he's not keeping this, just like in tefillin we said, if he does specifically, doesn't put on tefillin, he goes into the category. When it comes to tefillin, there's no kshartam. By shchita, if he doesn't follow shchita, he doesn't go into the category of a zavachta. And therefore, shchita, he is like a mumur lahachas, which means he's like a goy, which means the shchita is possible. So now, but that is when somebody doesn't do it l'teyavin, definitely doesn't do it lahachas. But what happens? This is Alter Rebbe brings over in the Kuntasach. What happens if somebody he's I don't know if it's l'teyavin. We discussed in last week the other Kuntasach or in the Siman, I think, where it discusses about the person that we say if it's only a little bit of work, he only has to walk to the mumche, or there's a few mumchim in town. It's not considered a lot of work. It's not the same as doing a lot of work. So he brings it from the Tvua shirt. Somebody who doesn't even want to do the minimal amount of tircha zuta, a minimal amount of tircha. Tvua shirt has a suffix. Maybe somebody who's not interested in doing even the minimum, mamish, laziest you can get. Maybe he's also in this category of bar zvicha. The Alter Rebbe says no, there's no suffix. The fact is that if you would bring in front of him, this lazy guy doesn't want to go anywhere, if you would put in front of him kosher and treif, you'd offer him both. They look the same. I have no idea if they taste the same because nobody's going to know unless it's a guy tasting it, but two things in front, they look the same, they hopefully taste the same, and he will choose the kosher and not the aser, he's already goes into the category of Munat Yavan. He's not, the fact that we discussed as a definition that sometimes you trust him because even by a Shavik Isura, he leaves the Isra aside and he eats the heter. By Tirchek Tana, we do say that usually a Mumar is going to do the Tirchek Tana. Over here, we know this guy is not doing the Tirchek Tana. That's still not enough to take him out of that, to put him into the category of Lahachis. Of not Lahachis, of the category of not Latayovin, which automatically becomes a Lahachis. Rather, no, it's the fact that if he would have kosher and treif in front of him, he would choose the kosher, already puts him into that category. The fact that he's too lazy to go doesn't take him out of that category. The definition of Latayovin is Latayovin versus not Latayovin / Nahachis is if you have in front of you the two, which one will you choose? Not that how much interest you have in working hard. Yeah, that is when it comes to a Mechal Shabbos. Now, if you saw, I don't know if anybody, I already said before, I'm the last dafka that people paid attention to what was in the booklet. If you turned all the way to the end of the booklet, I put the first two simanim of the Chazon Ish in Shchita. Siman Aleph, Siman Beis. The reason why I put him in here, because I found he's one of the most thorough discussions of the whole din of the whole din of what's considered the Mumar L'Tev, Mumar L'Hachis, everything else, when it comes to Shchita is the place where everybody discusses it. If it's a Mumar for this, if it's a Mumar for that, the whole discussion on that. There's one little paragraph that I wanted to read. You could read the whole thing when you have time. It's Ois Yud Zayin. Ois Tes Zayin. The end of Ois Tes Zayin. And what's the discussion over here? Discussion comes after discussion about Mechal Shabbos B'Farhesia, if he's considered a Mumar L'Chol HaTorah. And he has a discussion, he tries to find why to make every single, even the Mechal Shabbos B'Farhesia, not to be Mumar L'Chol HaTorah. And then he ends Ois Tes Zayin Sfal V'nireh. The Ein Din Moiridin Ela Bizman Shashgachos Yisborach Gluya. This din of Moiridin, that the Apikoides, Amin, it's din of Moiridin, you Moiridin is worse than the guy, is only when it was Eibishter's presence is visible. You see Ashgacha Pratis. והכויפרים עוז הוא בנליזוס מיוחדס והטויס היצר לטייבס והפקרס. To be a koifer, you had to have a specific low-life trait to you to become a koifer. ואז היה ביור רשויים גידרי של אילם שהכל יודו כדוחס הדוירס מביא פרנס לאילם מביא דבר חרב באילם. Then it was a good thing to get rid of the Rishoyim. So one of the things that was Moiridin, you had to get rid of them. אבל בזמן ההלם שנכנס האמונה מן דלס העם, today that Eibishter is not clearly visible to the majority of the people, to Dalas Am, to people who are not so knowledgeable. So if you're going to start going after this Apikursim and Minim and Koifrim, you're not going to save Judaism. It's going to make it worse. The whole purpose is to fix it. The only reason why you would have to consider the idea of Meiridin and go after the Mechal Shabbos B'Farhesia and go after the Koifrim and go after the Minim and go after the Apikursim and take care of all the people that are doing wrong things is only when going after them is going to make the people's belief better. But if it's not going to do so, בשעה שאין בו אין הדין נוהג בשעה שאין בו תיקון. אין הדין נוהג בשעה שאין בו תיקון. This din of Meiridin cannot apply in a time when doing Meiridin is not going to have any positive effect. So people are going to say you're a bunch of violent people. The only mission we have is to go, take them, drag them into Judaism with love, and then hopefully they're not going to be in the category of Meiridin anymore. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to. The fact, if you're going to go after if you're not going to go after them, and if you're going to go after them, you're not going to achieve anything. You're not going to achieve anything. And therefore, that's what I want to point this out. I think it was one of the first ones that clearly wrote this idea in this generation, or the previous generation, that that these dinim that we know from Shulchan Aruch are no longer so clearly applicable today because the scenarios and the world changed.
Why did it change the months?
It doesn't change Naamanus. Doesn't change Naamanus. Naamanus is still not Naamanus, not anything.
It's a very interesting style.
Yeah, it's still Naamanus doesn't change. The whole thing is Naamanus. Naamanus doesn't change. Still, Naamanus is a category. If he knows it and he's doing it regardless for what reason, you have a problem trusting him because he knows and he's doing fakert. And if he doesn't know the halachas, how can you trust him anyways? How can you trust somebody who doesn't know anything? How can you trust somebody who doesn't know hilchas kashrus to give you a kosher meal? You can't trust him. The Naamanus is not going to help you anything. You want to take off, say it's not because not kенכרי l'chol divrei. You want to be liberal, open-minded. Okay, Machal Shav is not a Nachri. Can't say it's goy. It's not a good thing. Because he is Tinuk Shenishba, whatever reason you want to make up why he's no longer in that category. For the Naamanus, it's not going to help you anything. Because if he doesn't know, you can't trust him. The only question is, if it's Machal Shabbos, Befarhesia, because he doesn't know, but he has a kosher kitchen, could you trust him? It's a separate question. Maybe one day we'll get to it. And the Shiur and the Chasnida will be tomorrow. The